We're all losing our minds right now with the political climate, and the stress is getting hotter. So we're today going to answer listener questions, ones that you sent in for both myself and Brian, today on Off the Couch. And welcome to Off the Couch, where psychology meets everyday life. I'm Dr. Greg Sane, psychologist, and I'm here with producer Brian Gomez.
Hey, you guys.
And we have on the board Mr. Noah. Hi, Noah.
Hi, Dr. Greg.
It's so good to see you again. Well, today we have special listener questions. We did this once before, and I was nervous then, and I'm even more nervous now. So, because you know what, I have a thing that happens to me, Brian. I feel like, oh no, what if my mind goes blank? But you know, if my mind goes blank, that's a symptom of anxiety, and we'll just have to talk about it. So,
okay, maybe you can coach us and yourself through the anxiety.
Sometimes that works. Sometimes not. Let's go ahead and start. But you know, when we were driving over here, you were talking to me about the stress that you're under.
Oh yeah, I fell under that whole doom scroll situation, which I feel like we both tried not to engage or like fall into that hole of like doom scrolling.
Yeah.
But I fell into that yesterday, and it carried on till today, which I was like, oh no, today I'll be better and it won't really affect me. But I am upset still.
You're feeling upset. So this will probably be helpful to go over some of these things for you. And we'll see about how they are for me. Why don't we just get started? What is a question somebody is asking about?
Okay, so for the first one, which is we're pretty much on topic about it, where it's how do we stay sane in this political chaos? This one's for you, Dr. Greg. With everything going on politically, it feels like every day brings more bad news. How do we stay informed without feeling totally drained or hopeless?
Very good question. So actually, I've given this one a lot of thought, because I think one of the biggest problems in our society today is that information is too available, and it's available everywhere, and people don't know how to discern what is good information from bad information. One thing we don't really teach in schools is media literacy. You actually took a class on this in college, didn't you?
Yes.
I was so impressed.
It was a conspiracy theory class. That's what they labeled it as. But it was all about critical thinking, which I was like, I will never use this. This is so dumb. But I was like, okay, we'll go along with it. And here we are.
That's what college is all about, is critical thinking. Yeah. So I think that's one of the key skills they teach you, is how to look at things from many different angles. And I think that's one of its very best things. I think a misnomer of college is people think that they're just teaching you a topic, like they're training you for a vocation. But college is really meant to teach you to think. And then you can do your vocation on top of that. But so how do you deal with information? Well, sometimes because of our information overload, and because everything exists in algorithms where information is fed to us based on interests, it causes people to go more and more into their own personal rabbit holes, as opposed to being exposed to things on a broad base. One thing I can recommend, which is actually an expensive solution, but I do recommend it, would be to subscribe to a physical newspaper. And a physical newspaper operates differently than your phone or a tablet or laptop or anything. It doesn't have algorithms. It basically is laid out in a format, and you pick up the paper and you flip through it. Now, you probably do only read the articles you're interested in reading, but you're going to be exposed to a lot of information and news that you wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. So I think that's actually a good solution. And if you can stay off the phone and tablet, that's especially good. I especially don't recommend people getting news from social media. I know that social media can feature actual news, but social media also taints news in such a dramatic way, and I've actually seen it have a very destructive effect on people. So, you know, now we have all these, we talked about this once on our show, these are the news finds me people, as opposed to I find the news. So if you subscribe to a newspaper, you're an I find the news person. You go and look for news. But if you're if you look at social media and then whatever pops up there, you're more of a news finds me person. And news finds me tends to taint people in a particular direction. And the more you click on something or look at something, the more the algorithm is going to tilt in that direction. So you just have to be really careful of those things. Another option, I know this isn't psychology per se, but it's how to gather information more neutrally. There are a few websites out there, and I won't say right now because I can't remember them all. I can't remember one. Oh, geez, except Snopes, Snopes. But you can go on and look at websites that give you an analysis of the news. Like they'll say what it is it true, this story's out there, how true is it, what's it based on? So they really analyze the news, and actually that's a very helpful thing.
And I know a lot of people won't take that step. So if you're at least still just getting your news from social media, at least follow credible news sources. That isn't just somebody posting something that they saw off of Fox News or something like that, If you're following CNN or the New York Times or anything like that, if they're putting stuff out, then I feel like that's how I was trying to stay informed without overloading and just falling for the algorithm throwing everything out there, or civil rights accounts like that. Mm-hmm. I follow a lot of Spanish, Latin, Mexican supporting profiles on Instagram that they're the ones how I am staying informed, because I know it's not crazy stuff that they're spewing out or anything. It's just what's happening at the moment, and what we should be aware of.
Well, I mean, things vary over time. I'm a big fan of BBC. I'm a big fan of CNN International. I think is quite good, but these things change. CNN is changing its profile right now, and as full disclosure, I've appeared on CNN more than 50 times, so that I can say that at least here in LA, they're amazing people that work there, and I loved everyone there. There wasn't a person I didn't think was great, even people I didn't necessarily agree with. But everyone was great. But the problem that I see now is sometimes very key people are being pushed out, and we saw that happen with Don Lemon, but and that was for a variety of reasons, but he was really a good person on that channel. And we just saw it with Jim Acosta, who was a solid journalist, and we're watching this happen one after the other. So I'm concerned about what's happening to the mainstream news right now. Is it watering itself down to try to stay alive during the current administration, as opposed to being like a fourth estate to be more critical? And I would want the fourth estate, or to be a non-biased, critical resource news, to be no matter who's in the White House. I think it's one of the most important checks to our government is what the press does.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why we would want the freedom of speech to be able to speak out about what's happening.
That is a First Amendment right. And I think a lot of people get the First Amendment wrong, too. They think the First Amendment is I get to say whatever I want to whomever I want. That's not quite it. The First Amendment's really so that you won't get oppressed, or you won't get thrown in jail by the government for speaking out, generally against the government. So it's the government's not going to come after you for things.
Yeah.
So
it's just been crazy. That's why.
So I'm concerned that they're doing it through other means and other pressure. Was that psychology? But you know what? I do think too, psychologically, limit your time you do it. Don't do it in the first hour of the morning, or at least half hour, and don't do it in the last hour of the night, or maybe half hour. Keep a buffer when you wake up and before you go to sleep. Do not watch the news. Do not pick up your phone and scroll. Actually, I would say do some kind of other thing, like when you wake up in the morning, to listen to music, or even a funny video. I like comedy all the time. I can never tire of it. I can watch it morning, noon, and night, and I like to watch it before I go to bed. It makes me happy.
I like that idea, because you do have to, if you do feel yourself getting overwhelmed, or your emotions are changing while you're online or anything like that, you need to stop and find a way to soothe yourself back to grounding yourself.
There you go.
Yeah.
What's another one?
Okay, so another one.
That was a mouthful.
It's necessary, so I'm glad we're talking about it. Another one is talking politics without a blow up. We all have that one friend or family member who sees the world completely differently. Any tips for keeping those political conversations productive instead of turning it into a full-blown argument?
Wow, okay. So I try to help people with this one all the time. This is a really common one that happens with people, with families, and I have people talk about this in therapy. There actually is an approach in dealing with somebody who has a different belief system than you, and I'll talk about that. But one thing I've noticed is there are certain people out there that are more, they like to troll other people. When I say troll other people, they like to try to get their goat. They try to say things that will activate them, and then they'll push, and they try to upset the other person, and then they laugh at the other person. It's like they operate like bullies. So those people are very, very difficult to talk to or with, but I'll still try to give you an approach that may not work as good, because those types of people, sometimes you have to say, we can't have a discussion if you're going to act like this.
So would you approach it as like talking to a bully on how to talk to a bully?
It is like talking to a bully, and sometimes you can't really talk to a bully. You just can't. I mean, because what are you going to do? They just keep bullying, because they know that's the way to get you, is just to continually attack. But that's not a way to develop a relationship. That's a way to separate a relationship. So if I were going to talk to someone who really I did care about, like a family member or a friend who had a very different belief than I did, I would try to approach it, number one, with curiosity. As hard, and even as much, I know you're making a face.
I'm cringing. Yeah.
Well, at least try to approach it with a curious stance, and try to open your mind. Like, wonder, why does this person believe this thing? Like, what's going on here? And what do they know that I can't see? And if you can ask those kinds of questions, and just ask questions, it's going to open things up quite a bit more. There's an approach that we use with people who have schizophrenia. And often what happens when someone has schizophrenia is that they are resistant to medical intervention. So there's an approach developed by a man, Xavier Amador, who I really like this approach. It's called the LEAP approach, LEAP. And LEAP is listen, it's listen, empathize, agree, and partner. And let me explain those, because it's not as easy as it sounds. Listen is you might ask a question and then try to listen to the person. So listen for their response. So you might go, like, what would be an example, Brian? Let's demonstrate it. Just tell me, role play someone that like challenge me a little bit. I don't know.
Like, am I
like, I don't believe in medication or something, or just say whatever you want.
Oh, I'm a Trump supporter.
Okay. Yeah. Well, tell me about that.
Well, I've been trying to figure out how people can be,
well,
especially if they're like an immigrant. You know, like stuff like that.
Wait, you're now talking as Brian. So here, I want you to...
Oh, sorry. Because I don't know how to defend that, you know.
Oh, then let me just try to role play something else. I don't care.
Okay.
Do you know? Yeah.
Okay. Because he promised that prices were going to go down for groceries.
Oh, okay. So yeah. Oh, you say you're defending because he said prices would go down. I go, oh, well, tell me about that. Have they gone down?
Well, that's the whole thing. Like, their response is like not smart at all. So that's why I have a hard time with this.
Yeah, you're not being a good role player, because you want to say like, oh, they will go down, or I have complete faith in him, or whatever you might hear from somebody who has that point of view. But let's just say you want to listen, so you could at least see that. Do you ask questions and you listen for their response, and you ask more questions and really try to understand their belief, and you try to empathize, and I'd be like, and try to hook, like, why are they voting for this person because they have high prices. Have prices affected you? Well, I mean, of course, they've affected everyone. And say, tell me about that for you. What would be a good price for you so that you would feel better about things? Like, just try to ask them questions. Just try to get into their head a little bit and try to feel what they're feeling. That if you can do that you're in a good space. Try to get in their shoes a bit. And then I advise that you agree on what you can agree upon. So like with prices, yes, I do agree. Prices are higher than they used to be. I wonder why that might be. And they go, well, because the blah, blah, blah. They might say very negative things and go, really? Is that how it works? Is that how the economy works? Or is that how pricing works? Let's say the egg crisis. I mean, it's such an obvious one. That was what we all heard. The price of eggs are too high. If I, vote this way, then the price of eggs will come down. Now they're higher than ever. And you say, well, is that how things work? Did the price of eggs come down? And then it's like, well, no, they haven't come down. And why might that be? Well, because of the bird flu stuff. Huh, that's interesting. Was that going on before the election as well? Yes, it was. But, it's like you just try to ask questions. So you're basically, and go, yeah, I really agree. Egg prices are too high. But you can still ask questions about other things. So it's trying to get agreement between the two people. You listen, you empathize, you try to agree, and then partner. Partner's even tougher. How can we work together to try to make prices lower? What can we do? I don't know what we can do. Like raise our own chickens? I don't know. But you're like trying to come to a place of togetherness with this client. Now or client or person. Sorry, I'm talking like a
psychologist.
Yeah. But one thing I can say is that if you are confronted by a what about, where they're trying to change the topic and trying to point back at you, ask them to stop. If they're saying what about, you say, oh, you know what? I'm happy to talk about that topic, but why don't you write that down, and I want to stay on this topic till we end it. That usually ends conversations, by the way. That usually causes people to go, well, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Because what they're trying to do when they're trying to change the topic, they've usually reached the end of their rope with the topic they're talking about.
And with the leap approach, what if like all their responses are like super uneducated and just pretty much stupid?
Well, they can say, oh, I wonder if that's true. Let's look that up together. Like, let's see, well, where do you get your information? I often will ask people, well, where'd you get your information about this? Well, I saw it. My dad will always say, I saw it on CNN. I'm like, really? I didn't see it on CNN. Can you show me where you saw it? Because maybe.
So pretty much we're trying to like let them see how dumb they sound.
No.
Sorry. Sorry.
But you're trying to get them to think more critically, as opposed to just buying into a narrative.
And is it possible to teach them to think
No, but you're trying to get them on this thing. And you're saying, how do you speak to somebody? That's how you speak to somebody. You don't go in gangbusters trying to bowl them over with your particular point of view. All they're going to do is push back even harder. If you want to forge a relationship, you have to find a commonality. That's not always easy.
Especially now, I guess.
Especially now. Because now people feel quite emboldened, so they may have much less room for tolerating difference.
Well, I mean, especially on my side at this point, too. I feel like we've talked about it where I kind of don't care to be friends with somebody that voted that way.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people share that point of view.
Yeah, where I'm like, I don't even know if I want to have this conversation or why we even need to have
But that point of view is on both sides.
Both sides. Yeah. I know.
And that concerns me. What's another question? Do we have any more?
Yeah, we do. We definitely have plenty.
I mean, we're spending way too much time on these.
Okay, coping with political anxiety.
Oh.
Every election, every policy change, it's a lot. How do we manage the stress and anxiety that comes from feeling like our rights and our futures are on shaky ground?
Okay, so I had this exact thing happen to me yesterday. I went into political anxiety because they shut down all the funding for Medicaid and Medicare, like Medicaid services. And what people don't know is Medicaid funds the medical services of 1/5 of the U.S. population. So yesterday I'm going, holy Toledo, they're cutting off Medicaid, even if they temporarily pause it. These are poor people who are getting medical services, and poor people, if they schedule a day off from work to go get a medical procedure, that's a huge thing. That's a huge sacrifice. And then all of a sudden they go in for a procedure and they can't have it because it won't get paid. That's a huge thing that happens. And then it has effects down the line. They may get worse. Their cancer may grow, their tumor, whatever it is, may get worse. A lot of bad things can happen. Plus, having worked in a hospital I've worked in a few hospitals that accepted Medicaid funding, you see the types of people who use this service, and they are the people most in need. And so it was very, very concerning to me that this was cut off. And I went into complete holy Toledo, what's happening? I had to kind of pull it way back because anxiety, as a rule, thrives on the unknown. If you think that what is in the future is going to be scary and terrible, you're going to feel just terrible. But if you think in the future everything's going to work out, you'll be okay. You won't have anxiety. So the unknown actually causes people to fill that gap with some kind of terror in the future, some kind of very negative scene. And I started to go down that road yesterday. But I had to kind of step back and say, well, what if, and I had to think a little bit, because I personally couldn't do anything. Generally, when you have anxiety, you want to narrow things down to what you can handle. So what I can handle is voting. What I can handle is giving money to a candidate or to a cause. What I can handle is, sometimes I'll do like a task for a campaign or something like that. But I can't affect Medicaid funding. That's completely off. That's just a personal thing I care about. So I had to step back and go, well, there are competent people that are still in leadership positions in government who are overseeing that. And they did push back very hard. And I just saw today that they've rescinded that holdback, that they were stopping Medicaid, but there was so much pushback from so many people that they've now stopped that. But I don't know. That's just what I saw in the news. So, but that's terrifying. To do things like that is just not good organizationally.
Well, not just that. I'm thinking more about the mass deportations too.
Oh my God.
Because, I don't think Americans truly realize how much immigrants hold this country up.
You're exactly right.
With our just farm workers. There's so much that it's going to shift.
I was saying this well before the election. I'm like, this is the backbone of our society. I don't know how we can be so anti-immigrant when everybody is, picks the food, works in the meat processing plants,
Nannies,
what else? Nannies and
construction,
construction,
everything,
cleaning crews. We can go on and on.
And I want to know what American is going to get out on the field and pick vegetables for the amount of money that they get.
It's really interesting. When I was a kid, you did have Americans on the fields picking vegetables, but it quickly transitioned. It became a very undesirable job. Yeah.
And I don't see anybody going out there to get their hands dirty anytime soon.
We tend to be a little bit of a delicate society in many ways.
Privileged, I would say.
Yeah. So anyway, long story short is, yes, that creates a lot of uncertainty within that population and within the wider population, like we here in LA, like who's going to rebuild these houses? We don't have adequate construction crews. Who's going to work in the restaurants?
And they're not showing up anymore now to their jobs.
And of course, because they're terrified.
They're terrified.
And that is the point. So one thing we know is, at least at this point, is that immigration rates really haven't gone up dramatically since he took over. I mean, not immigration rates. Deportation rates haven't gone up dramatically. So a lot of it is for show. And what they are doing is filming things. They're having people wear like ICE, jerseys.
Propaganda.
It's propaganda, and it's made not because they're doing anything different, because they're trying to terrify the people who are doing things like staying home. They're trying to scare people, and they want these things public. They want people to stay out, and they've been public about that. I'm not saying conjecture here. This has been a public statement. So, terror is an insidious force within society, so I think this is something for us all to be concerned about. Psychologically, it creates a lot of uncertainty and anxiety. One thing I'll say about what I noticed as a therapist is everybody calmed down quite a bit the last 4 years, and things got to normal again. And now, almost in a week, 2 weeks, I mean, I couldn't believe it. I thought after the election, things didn't really change for me. And I'm like, okay, well, things are, maybe people are handling things better. No, in just the last week, I've noticed people become incredibly agitated. Now we have the complication of the fires, but we had the last week was a couple of weeks after the fire. So things have just gotten kind of crazy.
Yeah. I'll read another one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so another one would be finding strength in community. When everything feels out of control politically, how can getting involved in our community actually help us feel more empowered?
How can getting involved? Yeah.
But I also wanted to talk about, like, who do we turn to for guidance? Because we were talking about this yesterday, that we don't seem to have somebody there being like, hey.
We don't have a leader. We certainly don't have a charismatic leader. And I think that's the benefit of the president now, is that he's very charismatic, in that people follow him unquestioningly. They follow him. They'll take what he says as gospel. He also is kind of interesting because he'll say two different things at once. He'll say, the water here is one of the worst waters I've ever seen, and this is really a great water source that can really feed, and people will hear what they want to hear. Like he'll say two different things, and in the same sentence, and people will hear the part they want to hear. And I find that very clever, and I don't know that it's meant to be, but it certainly has an interesting effect. The people will just hear what they want to hear, and because they are attracted to him as a charismatic leader, they're sort of unquestioning, but yet they'll fill in the blanks where there are blanks, and they'll just think that he'll do what they want. We're seeing a lot of that now in the media, that people are upset about the actions he's taking when he was perfectly open about the actions he was going to take before the election. So anyone that voted and is upset about what he's doing, I don't know what to tell them, because they had to have paid attention, or unless they just voted for him because he had red hair.
That's what they have the upper hand on in their community. I feel like they're very closely knit. So
we don't have a charismatic leader. People who are not part of the presidential administration, really, don't have a charismatic leader. But I do think you can get involved in local organizations, and there are lots, and there are politicians who are such good people out there. I worked in that world, and I can say for a fact that there are many, many good people who work in the political world. You have to find the right one. Don't go for personality. But personality, I'm sorry, wins elections. People want to vote for someone they'd want to have a beer with, not someone who they would trust to make the beer. They don't care about that. They just want to sit and communicate. So it means that the politician both has to be a gifted person and smart, but they also have to be someone people can relate to. And sometimes that means relate to even if the people aren't always quite that educated about what's going on in the world.
Okay.
So I think it's a tough one. Bill Clinton had that ability. That was the last. Oh, and Barack Obama. I think, he was a smarty. And they both are very, very smart men. But Barack Obama was a little more of an egghead. But, he still had that ability.
Okay, I'm going to read one last one for you.
Yeah, okay, then we'll go. And the last one's for you because, oh, my God.
Okay. Turning anger into action without burning out, because I feel like that is one that will happen.
Yeah, let's talk about this. That actually is my biggest concern, is that people burn out. Because what we know in psychology is the worst thing you can be is defeated. And if you feel defeated, you get depressed. Now, that is going to be an approach that we are seeing, that sort of flood the zone with like just attacks and bills and constant derision, like constantly putting people down who don't agree with them, and attack. What it causes people to do is to eventually give up. It's sort of like if you yell at a dog over and over and over again and hit the dog will eventually curl up in a ball and not want to move. That is what we call defeat. And defeat leads to depression. And what we see is that's how people give up completely, and they just allow things to happen because they don't think they have an option. So to prevent defeat, you do have to, one, kind of shield yourself from some of the attacks. That may mean not going on and doom scrolling and doing things like that. But the number two thing is to channel your anger into something productive. That could be something for you personally, like doing a garden or, an art project, I don't know, whatever, or maybe your work or your family, or it could be something very proactive, like going and working for a political campaign that you believe in, or going to a march or something like that. Those can be helpful things, and you can feel more of a connection to others, and that will give you energy. So you have to start to put things together so that you have a place to go, because you don't want to give up in defeat. So connecting with others who are like-minded will help, and doing those kinds of things. There's another approach, which is not defeat per se, but we see a lot of now, which is obeying in advance. And I've been kind of concerned about the media that I've seen, and media I had respect for, but are starting to change, like CNN, what's happening there. I can be critical. They are changing their format to appease the current administration. And that to me is a very dark reality. And that concerned me. And I'm telling you, I'm not as happy about that.
No, I agree. But I do like the fact that you were saying, I have seen people, there's a lot of protests going on last week, pretty much, I would say, all throughout the country, which has been beautiful to see. And then it's been even nice to see like my white friends post like about ICE and like the actual steps on if you are encountered with an ICE agent or anything, how to, not fall for anything that they're trying to trick them into. So it's just nice seeing that there are people out there that care, even if it doesn't affect them directly.
This is the good side of it. The good side of it is that, people who are connected to resources and who know what to do, let's say with an ICE agent, are stepping up their, let's say, their social media presence or their outreach presence, and going out to people and saying, hey, if this happens, here's what you do, telling them their rights, and having rights organizations come together. I think that's the silver lining. I don't think it's a cloud that we want, but it's a silver lining.
Yeah. I've seen people too, like they've printed out specific like red cards too to hand out to like immigrants when they see them working or anything, just so they know their rights and what to say if they are approached by an agent too, which has been really nice. I mean,
good. Yeah. Brian, we have to ask you questions. We're running on time. Here, Brian, as someone behind the scenes, you're not really behind the scenes. How do you filter through all the noise of the political climate and decide which issues to focus on?
And that's what sucks, because I thought I had been doing such a good job until yesterday. Because I do have to stay, like, in the now and what's happening with social media movements, anything, so we do have stuff to talk about and give our, like, audience, like, information, that they need. So I thought I had been doing so good.
No, consider it a pothole. You just fell in a pothole. Like, fix your axle and let's move on.
Yeah,
That's
even
all.
yesterday I tried to like soothe myself after I realized like I had crossed the line with the doom scrolling, that I was like, okay, we can't behave like this, because if I'm just spewing hate out there too, then it's not really helping anybody, you know? Yeah, I just try to focus on what I can do myself to help in that moment, you know? Even if I'm seeing all this crazy stuff, I try to turn to posts that are more positive and like motivating people and like giving them ideas on how to, like, you know, fight what's happening, instead of just going out there and wishing death on others.
Oh my. I don't think that's a good thing to wish death on others.
Oh, I know, but at some point it's kind of necessary.
Well, I mean, you know, as I tell my clients, it's okay to fantasize, even to have dark fantasies. It's not so okay to do something about it.
Oh no, if we get to that point, maybe, but no. I'm not
Fantasizing,
there.
believe it or not, can be taken a far stretch. Let me ask you another one. What advice would you give younger audiences who feel overwhelmed by politics? This is physician heal thyself stuff. What advice would you give younger audiences who feel overwhelmed by politics? This is the same questions. Well, I guess you know, inquiring minds want to know.
Honestly, I would tell people to just get educated. Get educated with history and what has happened in times like this before, because this isn't the first time this has happened in the world. So if you can see what has happened, you can kind of see what people were doing in those times to actually help.
I love that.
You know?
So I love that, because one important thing is to look at history and what happened in history. And that's actually a very, very important lesson, because then it can help us to see what are some outcomes. There's a saying that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So what we're going to see is very similar dynamics to things that have happened in the past, and we need to learn from those things.
Yeah, because they're using a playbook from a dictator that did the exact same stuff that he's trying to do. That I'm like, if you guys just pay attention to what happened before and how people were reacting, working, and handling this, that would be the most helpful thing right now.
Brian, one more, if I can. What would you say to listeners who feel powerless when they see their own rights taken away? What can they do? What small, impactful steps could make a difference?
Dude, that one's a hard one, because
Yeah,
I feel
I
like
know.
that is what hit me yesterday, you know?
Yeah.
I'll
ask you one more after that.
Yeah, honestly, if you can't do much, find what you can do. Like, even if it is just posting information on Instagram or on social media, or reaching out to friends that might be impacted by it directly, or their families or anything, and just checking on them to make sure they're okay, or if there's anything that you can do to help them. Because yeah, it's very easy to feel helpless and like you can't do anything.
It is easy. And, you know, it just struck me that, you know, I wanted to do a show that's just devoted to psychology, and it almost saddens me that we have to talk about something like this. And yet this is probably the greatest impactful event in most people's lives. We talked about the fire, because that's really kind of an LA thing, though.
Yeah.
Let's face it. But, you know, people can learn from natural disasters wherever they are. And they're all across the South. I mean, anyone in the South has tons of natural disasters. But this is one that's impacting not only the entire United States, but also people in the world. Mm-hmm. So I just watched a thing by Fareed Zakaria today, kind of saying like how world leaders are looking at things. I mean, it's impacting the entire world. So we all have to pay attention to it. And psychologically, we have to stay sane through this whole thing. And we will work on staying sane. I certainly want to talk about other things. It's just that if things are going to be thrown, we have to deal with this. We can't ignore it. I can't stick our head in the sand. But let's talk about that one more thing I want to ask you. How do you maintain the balance between your personal political beliefs and producing content that remains accessible to a wider audience? Oh, gosh.
Oh, I feel like I kind of let that one go, honestly. If you listen,
today,
I mean, throughout the last few months, I feel like you can definitely tell what side I'm picking. And it's not even about a side. It's honestly just about like human decency. That if Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't pick of you as like a fan of the previous administration.
No, I feel like politically, like they should all just be volunteers, and maybe that would change everything. But yeah, I just hate when
Then
people
we just
abuse
have
the
rich
power.
people running it.
Well, I just hate when people abuse the power, and like the whole concept of like our government is to help the people, which that's not really what we've been seeing. So I am privileged enough to not have to shut my mouth about my point of view at this point, and I'm grateful that I'm able to do that here as well. Because there are a lot of people that do have to keep their mouth shut, whether they're around certain friends, certain employers, even their family, you know, that it's nice when you can hear somebody speak their mind about, you know, what's happening and be like, oh my God, that's how I feel, but I can't really say anything, you know? So I kind of just dropped even the censoring of like, oh, you might want to work with somebody rich that's conservative and is a Republican, you know, so don't say anything, you know. But I honestly don't care. I'm kind of over
I think you can work with whomever. You just need to be respectful of the person, their point of view, and how to work with them. But if they are saying things in a way that violates other people's rights, then that's a concern. I mean, I would say that I wouldn't want to work for that person. But what's interesting to me is that, you know, I've worked with people and I have people in my family, as I've said, who are very polar opposite me. And I have to say I work on the relationship with the person, but I don't hide who I am or what I believe. I just say this is what I believe, and that's that. You know, and I disagree. And but I'll try to remain in what I started with, which is to be very curious. Like, why do you believe this? Like, I don't say, why do you believe this? But I try to ask them questions that often they can't answer. I think that's probably the most fascinating thing to me, because a lot of people I've noticed are stuck in a media bubble and they parrot what they see on TV, but they haven't done as much work as, let's say, the talking heads on TV. So you ask them about things. I discovered this years ago. There was a radio guy named Rush Limbaugh, and I had a friend who was a huge Rush Limbaugh fan, and I said, you know, his arguments can be dismantled almost immediately. And he's like, what are you talking about? How can they be dismantled? And I'm like, well, give me an argument, like he says. And he said, da-da-da-da. And I said, well, what about this? You know, let's talk. You know, let's not what about a different topic, but like, you know, let's talk about that, and let's do it. Let's break that down, blah, 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 blah. And then I go, can you counter that? And he's like, no. And I go, okay, well, how about something else? Because he just would say these very simple arguments that didn't have any nuance, but they were painting with such a broad brush, he appealed to a broad audience.
I get that point of view on how to approach things, but I think
you're a bash them over the head guy.
Yeah, because I'm like, this is a different political climate we're in. It's
and you might be quite correct. That is the approach, but I'm still not there yet.
Because it's like, if you're siding with that, it's a pretty evil mentality. I don't see it any other way.
It's shocking. I did see a video earlier today.
I'm sorry. Do you disagree that that's not an evil way of being?
I'm horrified by what's happening currently. I'm horrified. I think to threaten the dignity of any human being, to want to pull the rug out from any human being is inhumane.
Human beings that have done nothing to these people.
But the other piece of that is, I want people to thrive in our society. I also don't understand why they're pulling the rug out from under our economy. I don't understand why they're trying to pull the rug out from under public health. I don't understand why they're trying to pull the rug out from national intelligence and, keeping things secret. I don't understand why there were all these tech oligarchs on stage at a presidential inauguration as opposed to average voters. I do understand, but I am very concerned about what's happening. So yes.
I mean, that's literally what Hitler did. So that's why I'm kind of like, if you're on that side, it just looks bad. Like, there's no defending or explanation of it, because if that's the case, then you're just defending the Nazis and Hitler. So that's my stance of how this is all.
Well, here we go. We need to end the show, but we say something like that, and then that loses that. People never consider themselves evil. So people who are bullies don't consider themselves bullies. People who are doing and saying evil things will justify those actions too, in much the same way as the bullies do. The bullies are just a subset of what we're talking about. They're people in power who are inflicting pain upon others. But the people who are supporting those bullies and maybe in supporting things that are harmful to other people, those people don't know. They don't classify what they're doing as evil. They justify it in different ways. Oh, I'm helping keep America great, let's say. So I don't think that they think they're evil, and I think calling them evil or calling them or likening them to Hitler is actually a positive, a way to break through to them. I do think you can say intellectually, wow, this is exactly the same as what was going on in 1930s Germany. And here are the parallels. What do we do about that? But when we actually call someone or to say, to invoke that name, what it does is causes them to lose any critical thinking, and all they do is then get into defensive mode, and then we've lost the argument.
Got it. So just point out facts of history.
Facts of history, well, facts have taken a second place. I'm a big fact person, so I'll still advocate for that. I think we need to wrap it up for today. Wow, I can't believe we did that long of a show on just questions. That wraps up the show for today. Remember to like, subscribe, give us 5 stars, you guys. We really appreciate you being here. If you have any questions for us, hit us up on socials at Ask Dr. Greg. Brian checks those, so you'll be saying hi to him. Until next time, this is Dr. Greg, Brian, and Noah. Thank you, Noah. I didn't ask you any questions.
That's all good. You can ask me something next time. Next
time we'll ask you 2 things. Okay, good. Thank you so much, and it was wonderful having you. Stay present. What are we saying?
Stay flexible.
Stay flexible
and be kind.
And be kind.